LTAG gives professionals who have overwhelming caseloads an excuse to blow you off. The mentally ill tag is their excuse to blow you off. They don't have to believe anything that you say. They don't believe anything you say because of the tag. It's not that they don't believe anything you say. You can hear in the conversation with Marcia Estrada and with Meg Mitsogatis and with many others. Yes, this is their mandated job according to the state of Nebraska. You also get to hear them saying over and over, it's not going to work. Well, hold on a second. Why isn't it going to work? Here's why it doesn't work. You look at Black Lives Matters. You look at the leadership. You look at the people who are fighting for the rights of black people. There are other black people at the top of that. It is people with a personally vested interest in fighting for their very own rights. We're going to get into parents of autistic children because of this conversation, or because of this. So just so you know, parents of autistic children do not have a vested interest in their children in most cases. Let's talk about the good versus the bad parents of autistic children. First, we'll talk about the good parents of autistic children. Laura Nelson is a good parent of an autistic child. She is. Her child's safety is the most important. Almost. See, the biggest worry of every parent of an autistic child is what's going to happen when these parents are gone. Now, there's the parents who don't give a shit. That's the other kind of parent. Maybe they worry about what's going to happen to their child when they're gone, but really their child is an excuse. Well, you got to understand, it's difficult having a daughter who's nonverbal. You got to understand that's tough, Sean, and the way that I deal with it, that's not the world's business. It is when you're volatile. And you're supposed to be helping someone who is an at-risk adult, and you can't do it because you're drunk. And you use your child as an excuse for the things that you've done, the things that you did wrong. You use your daughter to justify horrible things that you did. Maybe you had the best of intentions, but you didn't keep your word. And it's not that you didn't intend on keeping your word. You absolutely did, but the alcoholism got in the way. And the screaming and the shouting and the rules that are supposed to protect you. Your daughter is not able to speak. She's not able to defend herself. She's not able to protect herself. And so she's an easy target. That's a bad parent of an autistic child. Shannon Alvarado would never hit her daughter. She would fight tooth and nail to the ends of the earth for her daughter. But her daughter is still an excuse for her, just like my older brother wants to use God as his excuse. My older brother never tried listening, never tried finding out what was going on from me. So I had to go to a lot of other people who didn't have a vested interest in me. Let me tell you about the Nebraska Autism Society. How many of those people are actually autistic? Now let me explain to you how both good and bad parents of autistic children are selfish. Laura Nelson wants to make the best use of her time with her son as she can while she is still alive. She's well aware, absolutely 100% well aware of what is going to happen to her son when she's gone. The reason for that is because her vested interest is only in her time with her son now. She doesn't care to actually fight the fight. If she fought the fight that needs to be fought, When her and her husband are gone, there are two people that absolutely love her son above themselves. Myself and Nova Wilmuth. Laura Nelson could have come forward in my situation, but her son is the most important thing to her. And she told that to Sean Holloway, and he was able to use that, and so was the sheriff. They were able to use that against her. The questions, according to Laura Nelson, she does need to testify in court about. The questions that Scott DeCosta asked her were leading questions. When she told me the questions that DeCosta was asking her, stuff that he claimed repeatedly when I tried to tell him about, and his deputies, it's not his place to investigate it, wrong jurisdiction, and so on and so forth. I needed him to investigate the crimes committed against me by people in that town that Laura Nelson was there for. And he didn't ask her any questions about that. He tried to insinuate that I was in love with Natalie. And according to Laura Nelson, she said that she explained to him that I wasn't. How could Laura Nelson possibly know that I wasn't in love with Natalie Bollinger, that that's not the kind of relationship that it was, if I didn't go to her and didn't tell her? Now, Scott DeCosta, hopefully he recorded that on his body cam, because chances are pretty good that Laura Nelson didn't record it. Laura Nelson, she could have come forward on many occasions. She was afraid for her son. She is still afraid for her son. Do I want anything bad to happen to her son? Absolutely not. If I'm in Chapel, Nebraska, and somebody does something to Leslie Snell, there is a possibility people will take it out on all of the people who pretended like they were going to defend me at the beginning. All of the people who came forward at the beginning, but then hushed, magically disappeared, magically fell off the planet, magically couldn't speak up in court. It's not that they didn't type these things in these groups, it's that the cherry pickers, the people the cops were willing to listen to because they had a vested interest themselves, that's where your group gets involved, isn't it? Black people with black leadership have a vested interest in protecting black interests and black rights, including if it means selling a false narrative to protect those black people, like the situation with Zaid Atkinson. Yeah, BLM was all over that, weren't they? Were they all over the situation with Samuel Leon Lawrence IV? No, because he was much closer to the homeless situation. He didn't matter. Black Lives Matter did not give a shit about Samuel Leon Lawrence IV. But you know who does to this day? Me, because he was still a victim. He wasn't victimized because he was black. I want you to look at Waylon Lolatai. Look at the color of his skin. Look how dark he is. He is way darker than Samuel Leon Lawrence IV. Way darker. Samuel Leon Lawrence IV trying to play that on the black card, that is for surely not going to fucking work. You're going to say this black police officer who is blacker than you are was being racist against you because you're black. No, it's because he's a fucking cop and he's a goddamn bully and he thinks it's okay. He got away with doing it with me. He got away scot-free. Boulder Police Department, Broomfield Police Department, Adams County Sheriff's Department, Haxton Sheriff's Department. They all took an active role. Clearview Behavioral Health as well. And the hospital in Lafayette. And the police in Louisville all had a vested interest. Let's say that all of these police, they're not police officers, they're black people. Let's pretend that they're BLM. Let's put them in those shoes. Let's put them in that fair and equal perspective. We've got a bunch of black people with badges. Of course, it's a little different. We've got all these black people with badges, and their underlings are doing wrong things, and these wrong things will reflect on them. So this leadership has a vested interest in hiding those crimes, and hiding those wrongdoings, and making themselves and their departments look better, or making themselves and black society look better. And I understand, yes, with all of the anti-police stuff right now, just like all of the anti-black stuff that used to be all over the place, it's not all over the place now. Yes, we have racist hate groups. The majority of us, though, especially who grew up in the 1980s, we don't see skin color. We do see repercussions. We do understand that racism exists, but we don't have it in our hearts. We don't have that hatred. The 1980s were beautiful when it came to human and civil rights. In the 1980s, I was locked up with black kids who beat the living fuck out of me daily on many occasions. Not all of those facilities, most of them, there were black kids who were my friends who would protect me from that. Not on the first day. Some of those kids who beat me up for the color of my skin. Let me tell you about a guy named Tim, a child study and treatment center in Kent, Washington. Him and several other black kids beat the shit out of me. Didn't like me because I was white. By the time I left there, me and Tim were the best of friends. Do I blame all black people for what Tim did? No. Do I blame all black people because Tim beat me up? No, because I'd also have to blame all Native Americans because he was half Native American. Native Americans didn't beat me up, just like men didn't rape you. Tim beat me up. Ted raped you. Men can do those things. And we get all this stuff up in our heads and we tell ourselves this stuff isn't related and it doesn't have anything to do with the situation at hand. You know what? There's a reason that they went out of their way to allow my predators to show up in court or to victimize me from Texas and have their slander in my court. That's right, even with Natalie Bollinger, with irrefutable evidence from her that she said that we didn't have that kind of relationship. And I said that we didn't have that kind of relationship. Kara Johnson Miles, the gaslighter who got busted. Her and the Bollingers and the Kellys and all of them went out of their way after that. After they got busted by Shannon Alvarado, and by Shannon Alvarado, the police report. All these people saw it happening and did nothing. Claimed that they would. Eventually they were going to. A lot of these people wanted to throw things that they actually did in my face. Well, I already admitted that you actually did those things. I admitted all of the good things that you did. You wanted to be angry at me for doing that. Is it the truth? Were you trying to help? Were you cut off? Or were you gaslighting me? One or the other. Either you tried to make a police report and they blew you off, like you said, or you never tried and you're gaslighting me, and you did so for months, some of you years, pretending eventually you were going to. Shannon Alvarado wanted to throw it in my face that Alyssa Rainwater gave me money for the phones. She absolutely did, and I spoke up about that. She was angry about that. Alyssa Rainwater was angry about that I recorded that I said that I put it up on the Facebook. You know what? I just said it. Or sorry, I typed it. When I was making videos of full disclosure, people are saying it's wrong for me to tell everyone's personal business. When I was trying to keep people's names private and keep them safe, people are like, well, you're being vague and ambiguous. One or the other. Meanwhile, people are telling me that it's not okay to post it on YouTube or the internet, while it's okay for all these other people. You're not contesting. After all of the efforts that you made and the cops went out of their way to lie, and you didn't contest it. When I said the exact same things about you that the cops said about you, and you made no effort to contest it, with all of your reasons or excuses, I saved your reasons or excuses. It doesn't matter which one that you want to call it. The fact is, that is what you told me at the time. Is it true or is it not? Were you telling me the truth or were you gaslighting me? In many of these situations, these people were not gaslighting me. I don't believe that Mandy Hughes was trying to gaslight me. Carl Rogers, absolutely. The evidence cannot be refuted. It's undeniable. And it's out there in public. There's a lot of stuff that is not public. I can only talk about it. Jamie's son, I can only talk about it. Now, although it's not against YouTube rules and regulations, well, there's some people who might be able to twist it in civil court. And that's a tough line right there. Laura Nelson is not fighting for black rights. I'm using BLM as an example. I'm going to put Laura Nelson. Let's say that it's black people's rights, and she's the parent of a black person. Well, let's say that kid is adopted and she's white. She doesn't actually know what that kid's going through. If she wants to keep her kid, she's got a vested interest in keeping her kid. She doesn't have a vested interest in fighting for black rights. And when that child is victimized because he's black, she may very well tell him that it's all in his head, that he just needs to get over it, that it's his fault. You're being too sensitive. That's right, you're being too sensitive when people are beating you up over the color of your skin because your parent wants to not believe you because that parent hasn't gone through it. Or, like with Laura Nelson, if her son did explain to her about abuse, she absolutely would do something about it. I do have to say that. She knew that I was being abused. If the things that I was being abused over happened to her son, she would absolutely fight. She would fight tooth and fucking nail, but they're not happening to her son, they're happening to me, and I'm not family. Regardless of what she said to me, just like with Brenda Dickinson, there's her own vested interest. It's more important than I am. It's more important than coming forward. It's more important than telling the truth. These people are dumb, though. They're stupid. Laura Nelson knows what's going to happen to her son after she dies because she didn't fight. Amanda Daniels. What's going to happen to her son when she dies? Because she didn't fight. She'll fight for him, yes, but she won't fight for us. She won't fight for autistic people's black rights because she's not black herself. Or sorry, not black herself. Megan Misegatis is not black herself. Marcia Estrada is not black herself. When we're being victimized by the government, and our leadership are all people who get government funding, and they show that by their paperwork, by the fact that they try to shove other people out. Megan Misegatis, everyone tried to shove her out. I was trying to explain how important it was for them to talk to Megan Misegatis. And you can hear Penny Cooper repeatedly trying to push her out. When I told Penny Cooper that I was going to go see a different doctor about a diagnosis, she was trying to if I'm seeing two of them, the government's only going to pay for one. They're only going to pay for one of them. Now, the thing is, with the other one that I saw, well, he didn't diagnose me with schizophrenia either. I have that recorded. However, there's other unprofessional things that he did. They're against the law and against the DSM-5. So that doctor, I do have that situation recorded, and that was since I was in prison on false charges. These people know what's going on, but they keep making excuses not to try. If they were black like me, they'd understand why they have to try. Why it's important to do something about it right now. If a male is raped and he goes for help, I want you to listen to the recording with Ventus. When Ventus is bitching at Beatrice because he was sexually assaulted New Year's Eve. Ventus, the guy that I was staying with, that was going to help me, was too traumatized because while he was drunk and on drugs at this party, somebody touched him inappropriately more than once. He went to the person who was throwing the party about the incident. It was so bad. And this person went around touching everybody. Ventus was highly offended by this. Now, you guys know men that go around and do this to women, and you guys blow them off and say, oh, he was drunk, he was drunk, he was drunk. That doesn't make it okay. What happened to Ventus is not okay. The way that people treated him when he went to them about that problem was not okay. But then again, as a male, what he wanted was consolence from these people. And what these people told him instead, Beatrice downplaying how he felt by saying that this happens to women all the time, that's not okay. Now Ventus, having gone through it himself now, being too traumatized at that point, I'm not able to work on any of my stuff because of his trauma, his recent trauma. I had very recent trauma in the jails. And I couldn't even tell him about it because as soon as I got there, he had trauma immediately. He was traumatized by a sexual assault and people wanted to downplay it because they didn't actually rape Ventus, that it wasn't a big major thing. But as a male, he didn't want to turn it in. Not to the cops, anyway. If someone would have supported him instead of blowing him off, maybe he would have. But he's also a male, and he has to worry about what people might think. Far more than a woman would. Meanwhile, there's a homeless and disabled person in his house who's trying to be as supportive as possible. If it hadn't been for the warrants that I had, I would have gone in with him. And I should have tried to do so anyway, but I already know they would have arrested me. So did he. Just like he would have gone in, but he had warrants for his arrest. That's why he didn't go in with me. And while I have to understand why he didn't, he doesn't understand. He doesn't want to apply it the same way the other way. When I said he couldn't help me if he wouldn't go in, if he couldn't go in because of his warrants and I needed someone else, he couldn't because of his recent trauma, I needed someone else, but that someone else was Stephanie Mejia. When Stephanie Mejia got there, he dropped his trauma, and it was about sex, and it was about impressing Stephanie Mejia. These are not professionals. You guys tell me all the time, you make all these excuses why what they did is okay, but then there's the fact that I invested everything that I have. I gave up everything that I have. All of my money, everything that I had, every little bit. It's not like people were giving me millions of dollars. Dan Faber, by his own admission, did buy me those phones. Those things did happen. Everything that I said, that people wanted to treat me like I was schizophrenic for saying, Dan Faber, yeah, he verified the things that I said about his situations, but then he wanted to generalize for everyone, talk about how I had stabbed all these people in the back basically by telling the truth, how horrible a person I was, about situations that, again, he wasn't there for. He wasn't a witness to those situations. He was a witness to what was put out in public. He was a witness also to his own opinion and how his own opinion cut me off. Because like I said, the mentally ill tag, he automatically assumed that I was in the wrong. Automatically assumed, like he thought those pretty words were supposed to fix it. He typed many of those pretty words himself. And he knew when he was telling me I just needed to man up, I was manning up. I was also doing what I was supposed to by letting someone know in each and every one of these situations. And these people verify that I did let them know. But did they fight? By his own admission, he never tried to make a police report. Wasn't willing to try and never was. But at the beginning, it was different. You can't help me if you're not willing to talk to the police. Don't tell me anything you're not willing to tell the police. And I said that from the very beginning, and I maintain that to this day. I said that all of those things, my YouTube that I have now, the one that I had before, all of the evidence, every single thing that I have ever posted, every communication on the internet between myself and anyone is open to any and all law enforcement. They do not need a warrant. They have my permission. However, with my permission, they can get a warrant. They have my permission. That's because I need that evidence opened up. I need the things that were destroyed, that these other people are able to claim whatever they want, and I can't contest it because I don't have access to it. They were able to take it out of context, which is illegal, and nobody's going to fight it because no one has a vested interest. You generalize that it's wrong. You generalize that it's not okay. These professionals, they admit that the reason they're not going to do their jobs as professionals or even try is because it literally doesn't work. They are fessing up to the fact that the system doesn't work to me. But they don't have a vested interest. So they're not protesting. They're not picketing. They're not out there with Autistic Lives Matters. They're not out there with Homeless Lives Matter. None of these people are my peers, and my peers have the same fears that I do, and they have communicated that. The things that I told you beforehand that my peers were going to say and use as excuses, they absolutely did. Their fears for their children, their fears for their families. Their experiences with the police. And this is so important. When they posted up their fears and their experiences with police, it shows that I have been telling the truth. And I posted it up and I showed you it wasn't just me. But you don't care because you don't like our brand of black people. Black people in Boulder County, if the population was equal, black people to white people ratio, and of course you got to ask Darren O'Connor when he did the math, of course. Are we talking about the residents during the school season? Are we talking about during the tourist season, or are we talking about during the off season? But black people, if they had exactly the same population as white people, would be incarcerated in Boulder at a 5-to-1 ratio over their white counterparts. He also did the math, and he concluded that a homeless person, that ratio is 346-to-1. Now, when I tell you that black people, there is a higher ratio of black people in the homeless community than there is in the housed community. Much higher. Now, what if I told you that the statistics and demographics that Darren O'Connor, well, he wrote them down himself. And I'm sorry, it was 346-to-1. I've got it on my computer. My computer's frozen up. But that is from Darren O'Connor. It's not that these people didn't speak up. It's that they didn't speak up in my case. They didn't say these things in my case. They looked the other way. Pretended I didn't go to them for help. Or made excuses when I went to them for help for treating me horribly. Many of them, it's trauma responses. Those words that you're not supposed to say, those things that you blow off a male victim with. And it's even worse when you're called mentally ill, because that allows them to illegally prevent everything that you can prove that you're telling the truth from being shown. They literally force you to break the law to show that people are harming you. When my little sister was telling me that her life was being threatened and Destiny's life was being threatened, did she go to the police or did she go to me? Leaving Chapel, Nebraska, getting completely out of the state. A lot of people go, you know what? You should have gone to the police about that situation with your sister. No, I went to the internet immediately. You want me to go to Scott DaCosta after he has committed these crimes himself against me and the people who are trying to help me? And then you get to listen to Dallas Richmond. He lives in a small town, and you got to hear him say, or see it in typing, that, well, I don't know if I posted that up, actually. I could do that today. I got a lot of other stuff to post, too. Jesus, fuck. With my computer not working, that is difficult. And meanwhile, all of this because autism is being treated like it's schizophrenia because these predators use the term mentally ill instead of autistic. They use the term mentally ill. That's where they play with the words. And you guys hate me when I play the words back. You hate me. It is so wrong when I do it back. You make every excuse for people to do these things to me, but it is wrong if I do it back. Well, with all due respect, our leadership and our version of BLM is people who aren't willing to try because they aren't the ones punished. Dallas Richmond's never been homeless. Most of these people have never been homeless, and many of them, when they were homeless, had different experiences than me. There's a lot of travelers who are pretty white females who, it's a party the whole time. The whole time, you know, especially you get a good road dog, a good traveling partner, you're going to have a blast. You are going to have the most fun you have ever had your entire life if you go on tour of the United States and stop in all these different places. Meet some new people, including some homeless people. Well, those people have it nicer than everyone else, especially if it's a pretty white girl. But that's not the experience for all of us. For them, yes, it's a choice to go homeless. You pretend that we're all that kind of homeless. Those people don't consider themselves homeless. They consider themselves travelers. They're basically on an extended vacation. Like people who have an excessive amount of money going on, what do they call it? They don't call it going on tour. Going abroad. Going abroad in Europe. I'm going to go abroad in Europe before I go to Princeton. And I'm going to learn how to use a fake accent everywhere I go. Stick up your nose! And then you guys want to complain about all these socio-economic issues that black people face. When you're talking about the ratio that Darren O'Connor's numbers themselves show, most of that 5-to-1 ratio is black homeless people. Myself, Mandy Singer, and many other white homeless people are telling you this. That's right, we're white, and we can plainly see with our own two eyes that these things are happening to black homeless people far more than they're happening to us. Well, not far more, but we're talking about at least a 2-to-1 ratio, unless you compare it with Zach Boatman. That's where we look at statistics versus individual cases. We're talking about a man who is actually schizophrenic when we talk about Zach Boatman, the white guy. I don't know of many people who have spent more time behind bars on petty shit, even petty shit that he didn't do, than Zach Boatman. I also don't know anybody who's gotten away with more serious shit than Zach Boatman, because cops don't want to deal with the serious shit. That means they have to prove it. If you're charged with murder, they're gonna have to prove it. And that's where all this circumstantial evidence and the cops trying to ignore the actual evidence and keep it out of court and giving me public pretenders who are rubber stamps for the prosecution all comes in handy. But they also had to get me to give away my rights by deception, and that's why, as an at-risk adult, I needed a guardian. I needed Laura Nelson to step up to the plate and be family, like she said. Not just for me, but for her son. I didn't need Amanda DeMette. Yes, I did. I needed her to come forward. Not just for me, but also for her son and her daughter. I needed Cara Rogers, aka Cara Mia, to come forward with me to the police. Not just for me, but for her son. I needed these people to come forward, and by their own admission, half of them said that they never tried. The other half said that they were denied. Exactly the two things that I told you. Now, when I changed my story, and I absolutely did, to these people didn't try, well, did these people try to contest it when the cops said it? When the cops were able to railroad me by saying it? It's not that I didn't try to communicate with you, it's that my predators were cutting me off from doing so. You want to pretend that I was going out of my way to threaten people, and that's why I was on Facebook ban after Facebook ban. No, I was made a target by the media for far worse than I had already been enduring before Natalie was killed. They didn't change the Facebook algorithms for almost 2 years. Almost anything that I posted could be called spam, and called spam until it disappeared. Now, there was also the fact that, well, Facebook isn't actually allowed to destroy any of that, because as you guys got to see, we found that on accident, didn't we? The message that I had saved about Facebook saying that law enforcement wanted my information. And no, I didn't fight it and I didn't contest it. When I found out that it was Boulder County who'd done that, that's what the assault, they had to charge me with a felony so that they could recollect my DNA. They wanted to collect all of the stuff from me that had already been collected by Adams County, but they had to feign an assault to do it. And in order to feign that assault, they had to do something called entrapment. And they thought they were going to get away with it. Okay, they thought they were going to get away with it. They thought for sure I was a killer. They thought for surely that I had killed Natalie Bollinger and that Boulder County was going to wipe the slate clean with the rapes that they had covered up and the Jean Bonnet bullshit. They thought they were going to wipe the slate clean by doing Adams County's job for them. But they had to pull a felony. By pull a felony, I mean they had to make it out to seem. When they said that I tried to assault them with a weapon, where's the weapon? Where is the weapon that I tried to assault them with? When they claim I tried to bite them, what did I try to bite them with? You know what that reminds me of? Reminds me of one of the Star Trek movies. So, there's been a murder on board the Enterprise. Actually, not on board the Enterprise. They took a spacewalk onto the Chancellor's Klingon ship. Spacewalked because the navigational control and also the artificial gravity was knocked out. This is a movie. You guys can watch it. I get that it's a movie. But then there's the Russian, Chekhov. Alright, so there's this alien who's being accused because these space boots are in his locker. And this is hilarious. They want to frame this alien, and they put these boots in his locker, and they pull out these boots, and they throw them before this alien to show it as irrefutable proof this alien took part in the killing of the Klingon Chancellor. Then it pans down to his feet, and there's no way his feet are going to fit in those boots. Not a chance in hell. But then again, how many of these people had a vested interest? They didn't have a vested interest in doing the right thing. They had a vested interest in protecting themselves and their own families. When they were targeted for, well, I'd say speaking up at the very beginning, but really it was basically just arguing. There's a few people like Laura Nelson who spoke up at the very beginning. But then there's the fact that although she spoke up about my quality and content of character, she did not even try to speak up about any of the situations that she was there for. And therefore the police claimed that it did not happen. None of these things happened. And one by one I've gotten to collect the proof that these things did happen. Not all of them, because Laura Nelson is she used to be very loose-lipped around me. But as you guys all know, if you paid attention in history, what was the slogan in World War I? Loose lips sink ships. They said that in World War II as well. Did you pay attention in history? I did. Chapel High School. I was given my history book 2 weeks before school because I got kicked out of Lodgepole and I had to go to Chapel High School. Great. That's 18 miles of walking less every single day. Lodgepole is 9 miles away, and I wasn't going to ride with somebody who was going to blame me for everything in her life because I'm a male. We don't have a Homeless Lives Matters. We don't have leadership that's autistic. We don't have spokespersons who are homeless. Because nobody's going to listen to our spokespersons. Nobody cares. So we have to go to professionals because we're at-risk adults because nobody cares. Nobody's going to listen to us. That's what makes us at risk. These stereotypes, these bias. You know the stereotypes. And just like with the whole cheerleader thing, the stereotypes about them. You guys want to project those in many cases as if they're true. And in some places, in some small towns, yes, there were cheerleaders in Chapel, Nebraska, and also in Lodgepole, Nebraska, who tried to live up to that cheerleader reputation. There's a lot of jocks who tried to live up to that jock reputation, but there's also a lot of those jocks who didn't. Are we going to continue to blame stereotypes? Mentally ill people do these things. Mentally ill people do these things. Homeless people do these things. Homeless people do these things over and over. Over and over. And you pretend that these special interest groups would not go out of their way to sell a false narrative to protect particular members that they have previously stuck up for. I get that people wanted to step back, step off, and hide. They didn't like the fact that I screamed and shouted. They didn't like the fact that I exposed the reality of the situation. With a lot of these people, they were my friends. I thought. I didn't have any reason to believe that I would have to record them. I had every reason to believe, or to at least have hope, that these people were going to come forward and eventually tell the truth. But I kept on telling them there's a time limit, and no matter what, they were procrastinating any excuse not to try because they're not the black man going through it. Those statistics and demographics about black people in Boulder, Colorado, they show that yes, it is black homeless people in specific who make up most of those demographics. If they took the homeless out of that ratio, there is a pretty good chance that you might find, contrary to popular belief, you might actually find that Boulder, Colorado, when you're not a homeless black person, has much lower statistics on that than anywhere else. Lower statistics on how much black people are railroaded. If you remove the portion of his 5-to-1 ratio of black to white being victimized by law enforcement and the justice system, criminal justice system in Colorado, in Boulder County in specific, it might actually show that white people are significantly arrested per capita and convicted more than black people. Now, compared with other places, see, I might be wrong about that, only by a little bit, but also when you compare those statistics with elsewhere, it really does show, first of all, that in most of the country, these black folks who are bitching about these things happening, these numbers are coming from the homeless, but they're not fighting for the homeless black people, are they? Their poster children are all in houses. Zaid Atkinson in a house. Elijah McClain had a house too. It wasn't his house, but he had a home to go to. A home that helps to keep him safe from the rampant victimization that the homeless have to go through, especially if they're disabled, because they're at a much higher risk. Laura Nelson doesn't give a shit about autistic people. She gives a shit about her son and her time with her son. And as a result, when she dies, and this isn't true either, she could always go to Nova Wellmouth and she could say, Nova, in case something happens to us, will you? But Nova would have to have a place for the boy as well. See, he's never going to be a productive member of society as you guys would expect someone to be. Given the right circumstances, he could be. I want to give you the example of a supercomputer. Supercomputers have to be stored in cold environments. Electronics heat up. You got to keep them cool. Now, if you take a supercomputer and you stick it outside in Death Valley, California, and it's meant to run up to 100,000 processes way more than any other computer for the most part. But you're trying to make it run 100 million processes, and you're trying to make it run them in that heat. No, it's not going to work. When I was in my element, Boulder, Colorado, I was a social butterfly. I was a happy person. I was accepted by the druggies in that town. I was accepted by the homeless in that town, but also I had my older brother there who had been there for years and built up a reputation. And that was the first time in my life where I had positivity from my brother's reputation. You have no idea how evil people were to me in Chapel, Nebraska and Lodgepole, Nebraska because of my older brother. In Lodgepole High School and Chapel High School, Eric was already out of school when I started going there. He dropped out. We've got autistic people who have good families, like Laura Nelson. Her son has a good family. Her husband gets frightened and startled and also angry very easily. His anger is from his fear. I understand his fear. I understand their fear for their son. I understand completely. They understand completely that it's a matter of public opinion. All of you do. All of you do absolutely understand this, and any argument otherwise shows that you're delusional. Autism, my piece of the puzzle, has done more to harm the autistic community than Temple Grandin. All of us autistic people who can speak, because those of us who can't speak get treated like retards. Laura Nelson knows her son's not retarded. Me and her both knew that he was highly intelligent before he was ever tested. He's the smartest kid in his school. But because he can't speak, and before we had these electronic abilities, people just assumed that they're retarded, and they wanted to pile all of us into that category. They wanted to claim that autistic people like her son were retarded, and then anybody else who's autistic must be retarded like her son. He's not retarded. He is more intelligent than I am, and I'm going to tell you that right now. All right? Laura Nelson's son might be Bridget Stegeman smart. Holy shit, that is oh my god! Bridget Stegeman is beyond super genius by over 40 points. But she can speak. She's not autistic. She might be, but she hasn't been diagnosed, and she came from a pretty well-adjusted family by comparison with most of us. But look at the situation. Look at the differences between Laura Nelson and her son and me. I get treated like I have a voice because I have a literal voice, but that doesn't mean that it's heard. When I'm treated like I'm retarded, and they're using people who are not retarded as their excuses to treat me like I'm retarded. Or they use schizophrenic people as their excuse to harm me by calling me mentally ill. They didn't call me schizophrenic in the beginning. All they could do was call me mentally ill and insinuate that I was schizophrenic. And when I was angry about that, they said, "Oh, look, see, he must be schizophrenic because he's angry." But look at all of the anger and hatred towards me. And I get told that doesn't matter in court. But my anger matters in court, doesn't it? The fact that we've got the Me Too movement, we've got pretty white girls sticking up for pretty white girls and hating men. They're fighting for their group while blaming an entire other group. Yes, because of statistics, I'm going to fight for those women. but because I know that there are situations that, well, because of things like that, there are women who are going to abuse that system. We have created laws that are supposed to protect the victims, but because it's specifically and nearly only used for female victims, and because it's supposed to prevent the predator from having access to them, but it's not applied when the same thing is happening to men. As you can see in my case, people want to make excuses for the predators. If the predator is female, especially if she is pretty female, they have to be afraid of the consequences because of, well, people's assumptions. She's pretty. She looks sweet and innocent. She must be sugar and spice and everything nice. And she was a victim because of her drug use. Her drug use was a product of that poor dear, everything that she's gone through. But I don't use drugs. And I went through the same things. And then you project onto me the things that Natalie Bollinger did to me. You project onto me the things that her predators did to her. You're predatory towards me because of the crimes of others, and your excuse is these demographics. Your excuse is these demographics, and you use these demographics for schizophrenic people and these situations with violent schizophrenic people, which is a much, much smaller ratio of the disabled community than you might believe. And we're in a country where up to 40% of those who are diagnosed with schizophrenia are not. That's because when you're homeless, people can do whatever they want. And when you're homeless and you try to turn in a cop or you try to turn in a predator, you are victimized for it. You are taken to a hospital where they tell the hospital that you are schizophrenic, and the hospital writes it down. You haven't actually been diagnosed by a doctor, but it's on your paperwork. This officer was able to diagnose you in 1 day. In 1 day. When according to the DSM-5, we're talking about 6 months. Even if that officer were qualified to diagnose me as schizophrenic, they didn't have 6 months. You guys want to use my public image to claim that I'm schizophrenic. No, my public image is what I have to do to be heard. You didn't hear me until I screamed. When I tried to explain calmly what was going on at Shannon Alvarado's to Dan Faber, he flipped his shit at me. Treated me like shit. Went out of his way to say those things that you guys all know these things. You already know that telling a man to just man up is going to push him to suicide. When he tries to come to you for help about abuse that he's enduring, and you say, well, I didn't see it, you didn't have to see it. How many people saw the situation with me and Natalie? Now, where's the proof? You can prove that I was stuck in the road, because I was. Yes, I was in the road. Yes, I was honking the horn. I was honking the horn for safety reasons. Just like the other night, I was honking the horn for safety reasons. I was locked in my fucking vehicle. I had an abscess on my backside that was affecting my brain, and it was actually unsafe for me to even drive at that point. That officer come up to my door. Started off treating me like, well, because poverty, obviously I'm living in my car. Came up to me with an attitude. Now, given the situation, I understand completely why he had a fucking attitude. Does that make me making an excuse for a predator? No, he didn't fucking do anything predatory. His tone was appropriate given the situation. I'm driving through town at literally 2:30 in the fucking morning, slow as shit, honking my horn like a fucking jackass. Yeah. I'd pull the dude over too, and thank goodness that's what I needed. Just like in Virginia. I was looking right at Natalie's mother when she said she was going to call the cops. And I mouthed the words, "Thank you," to her. I was so grateful for that. I still am grateful for that. That's what needed to happen. That is what it took for me to get the medical assistance that I needed. That's what it took for me to get my car out of the fucking road. She absolutely did the right thing in that scenario. And I'm not going to pretend for one moment that she didn't. What she did was beneficial to me, regardless of the context that she wanted to paint it in, or that Natalie and Alicia wanted to paint it in. But you can see plainly and clearly that they were embarrassed. You can see plainly and clearly that we were friends. That it was a broken phone, it was a fucked up situation, and that the narrative that they sold was wrong. Yes, I was taken off in a police car. They said that they needed a police. The Bollingers said they needed the police, but the police, their assessment was different. The police, their assessment was that I needed to go to the hospital. The hospital's assessment was that I needed to go to the hospital. Are you not getting this? The records show I wasn't arrested. That's a false narrative. The records show that while these guys are trying to call me crazy, while Detective Peterson, who I repeatedly tried to turn in, and officers and Sheriff's Department deputies assisted him and the Bollinger family in preventing me from turning in that paperwork, preventing me from turning them in for their crimes, including in the courtroom. Because these people don't have a vested interest in me, they have a vested interest in themselves. All of these people, even after admitting the things that I said, that I was treated like I was schizophrenic for, because these people never came forward. And they were allowed to push this shit in court because these people never came forward. I was forced to do desperate things because these people didn't come forward. And I screamed and shouted and yelled for years, "Come forward." And then instead of coming forward, they wanted to throw those things in my face, that they needed to come forward to the public, and they needed to come forward absolutely 100% to the police, to law enforcement. See, my predators used the media. My predators used law enforcement. They also use the media. And you get to hear from all of these people. I was trying to get help. The help that I needed was a safe environment where I could process this shit so that I could turn it in. And these people want to cut little bits and pieces out. "Oh, I thought I was just trying to get you to a safe place. Look, and I rented those rooms and I bought you those phones." That's right. That is absolutely right. But you didn't write a police report. You didn't put it in court. And people wanted to continue to treat me like no matter what I said, I must be schizophrenic because of the term mentally ill. And then later on, these officers told hospitals I was schizophrenic and jails that I was schizophrenic. And I'm going to tell you something. Predators like to pick positions of power where they can get away with the things that they're going to do. And in that position of power, they know who is easiest to victimize, and that's who they take it out on. They know that they can use their position to do that. Leslie Snell had advanced knowledge and knew that she was going to be able to keep me out of court, prevent me from going to court, because she was involved in all of my other cases. Her name is on that paperwork, and it's been shown on my YouTube channel. Well, you guys pretend like I'm schizophrenic for saying it and for showing it. Well, excuse me, says I. I've been able to do it on the internet. I've had the ability to show it on YouTube for years. I've had the ability to show it on Facebook for years. But you can listen to that stuff with Mandy Hughes. Yes, she did try to help me with the internet stuff so that I could turn it in. We didn't spend a whole lot of time on it because it wasn't working. Then we were going to set it aside and try it after we got a couple of other things done, and things in her family life and her personal life prevented it. Mandy Singer might be autistic herself. I believe that she could be. She shows a lot of autistic traits. But also, she shows a lot of traits of PTSD, and she does have PTSD. When situations got overwhelming for her, not just me, but I was absolutely a contributing factor and a contributing member to her stress, to her situation, and to the risk to her housing. I admit that 100%. When she snapped at me and basically tried to make it all my fault, including the situation that she was going through with her own family and with her housing. Yeah, those issues with her housing were ongoing before I got there, but I was still a contribution. That's where a lot of people, they'll admit some of this stuff, but they're not willing to admit the parts that they were a part of. Then I have to post it up on the internet to show that I'm telling the truth to the public that's harming me. That these people had lied, that they had claimed that they were going to do these things, that they had, after the fact, decided to cherry pick. Or when they say, oh, well, I wasn't there for it when it comes to helping me, but then they want to throw it in my face, a bunch of things that they weren't there for, that they only saw a small portion of. Like the situation with Candace Bondurant, when she let everybody know what a horrible person I was. She sent that stuff to Carl Rogers, and Carl Rogers posted that up. That's what Carl Rogers destroyed that GoFundMe for. That's the reason that Carl Rogers shut that down and destroyed that group of people who were supposedly going to help me. And these people were getting a hold of me and letting me know this. And still, I'm treated like I'm schizophrenic, like I'm making it up. But none of my supposed friends are looking at it like people who are predators are. These vigilantes who want to believe whatever that they're told without looking at the actual evidence. They're still looking through the evidence to find the cherry-picking stuff, aren't they? In the process, they're seeing the things that were done to me. They're seeing the things that were said to me, and they're ignoring them. That part doesn't matter. I was forced to do desperate things because there's no BLM for the homeless. There is no BLM for the disabled, especially autistic. None of the leadership of these autism places are autistic. None of them. I don't give two shits about Elon Musk and the Twitter bullshit at all. If Elon Musk gives a flying fuck about his people, well, here's what he needs to do. He needs to sue the shit out of the Autism, My Piece of the Puzzle. That's actually the one. I'm sorry. If I've been saying Nebraska Autism Society, I do apologize. It's not their fault. They do have some members that are autistic, but those aren't the ones I'm dealing with. What I'm dealing with is a parent of an autistic child, or an autistic adult, rather, now. My phone just got dim, so it's about to die. I got a few other things to talk about as far as this goes. Like Elijah McClain being autistic, but people wanted to still push the issue that he was black. The issue was that he was alone. There was nobody there to explain to those officers that he was autistic. There was nobody there for his safety. Imagine what it's like when you have to go turn in crimes that were committed against you to officers, and there's nobody there to explain it to them. And you've been all over the news, and when you tell them that you're autistic, well, they don't care because nobody else is there. They're going to twist that autistic thing into mentally ill. They're just going to say mentally ill. Natalie Bollinger knew that I was autistic. There's a reason she said mentally ill instead. Like a child, I want you to look at us as autistic people, about our traits. That acting like a child, that's called reverting. That is from extreme fear, most often from extreme abuse. It's not only an autistic trait, it's PTSD trait, post-traumatic stress disorder. The DSM-5 and how predators are able to use the term mentally ill to destroy us. And those of us who are mentally ill use the term ourselves, and we say, oh, well, we're trying to... We don't think that way about the mentally ill. We don't think that way about the mentally ill tag, but most people do. A lot of people who are called mentally ill, they'll use that mentally ill thing to discredit other mentally ill people, to try to insinuate that they're schizophrenic. That's always what it means when you blanket it like that. When you call them mentally ill instead of the actual disability that they have 100% of the time, you're trying to discredit them by insinuating that they're schizophrenic. Insinuating. That gets people to assume things that are different from what it actually is. Oh, these things must not have happened. We don't have to look at the evidence. We know Sean is schizophrenic. They called him mentally ill. He must be schizophrenic. You get to see how, while you say, well, I don't treat you that way, you get to see irrefutable evidence that the majority of the public does. And the majority of the public is not you. Just because you're not victimizing me doesn't mean that nobody is, and for you to think that way shows extreme delusion. Extreme. Got to see the thing with Zach where I was telling him about my phone issues that I was having, and he wanted to say that it's the FBI. This is a guy who thinks he's gonna try to defend me. This is a guy who wanted to believe that I was schizophrenic because people told him I was schizophrenic. Oh, and because there was a make-believe thing with some friends of ours. That's right. Me and Brandon Jeffson pretend that we had a civilian anti-terrorist team. It was just a fun game to play with the Beardsley boys. Those were his girlfriend at the time's brothers. We were pretty close to the same age. I'm only 2 or 3 years older than the oldest Beardsley. So, I mean, well, actually, the oldest Beardsley... Nope. No, I take that back. Because he's not a Beardsley. It's the mom's side of the family, not the dad's. But they do have one older sibling who at the time was in his 40s. Now, for me, I understand the family dynamics with all these people. I know all of these people. I know their personalities. I know their traits. The people I said were drug dealers, I was able to verify that they were drug dealers, either from their very own mouths or from the mouths of their friends and relatives. Like the situation with Gabriel Plunkett. Gabriel Plunkett is a victim. He's also autistic. He has Asperger's like me. But it's not Asperger's anymore. Asperger's needs to be a separate diagnosis of its own. So that we're not treated like, well, people's assumption of Laura Nelson's son. So that we don't have their wrong, obviously wrong assumptions, because he is the most intelligent child in his school. He is the most intelligent in his school. So obviously the assumptions about Laura Nelson's son are wrong. But then they want to be able, they use that against Gabriel all the time. Not Laura Nelson, obviously, but Leatha Plunkett. They use the stereotypes of autistic people to harm Gabriel all the time. Now he's an adult. Now he can speak up about the repeated assaults by Ken Wilson over and over again. And yes, I should have tried to turn those in, but you get to see how I'm treated when I try to turn them in. Now, you guys want to use situations in the last 2 years of how extremely scared I am of police, and you want to use that as an excuse. I want you to take a look at the police I had to go to. I'd been trying to turn in Scott DaCosta and his deputies since 2018. Look at all of the things that they have been able and allowed to do since 2018. Look at how our leadership, conceptually, sure, they know what's going on, they know the statistics, they know that it's wrong, and they know the chances that I was actually abused that way due to the statistics and due to public opinion. Yeah, chances are very, very good that I'm absolutely telling the truth. With Marcia Estrada, me being able to show her the fact that I was telling the truth, well, there's a reason that she wasn't calling me delusional. There's a reason she said I wasn't delusional in that recording. There's a reason that she didn't say I was schizophrenic in that recording. Now, unlike when I was incarcerated, when they took away all of my ability to communicate with these people and all of my evidence that I could show these people, and then they want me to see their doctors, and meanwhile, their very own doctors in the prison who interacted with me said I'm not schizophrenic or delusional. And that works out entirely in my favor, because that includes the abuse that I endured in the prisons. The doctors are aware that these people do these things. They're aware of the tricks that they use to get away with them. They're aware that the lack of body cameras with audio recording allows these guards to do whatever they want. It allows them to victimize anyone that they want in the prison. And it's just assumed that because these people are in prison, that they're criminals, they must be guilty and they must be wrong. Even if they are criminals. One of the guys that I was in there with, he was in there for blowing a man's head off. He admitted to blowing the man's head off. He was also victimized by the police in there. He was victimized by the guards in that facility. When I wrote something about it, they told me that I couldn't. Meanwhile, these needed to be police reports. But they're not. And they're supposed to be private. You're supposed to have the safety of these things that you're writing down not going through your predators and on their very own cameras. Yes, they do have cameras, but not body cameras, and those cameras don't record audio, but they're on in the facility all the time. They can look on those they can look on those video cameras, and they can see that when I tried to turn those in, because I didn't have access to turn them into the mailbox directly, this is on the mental health ward. That's right, because they were told that I was schizophrenic and told that I was delusional. That's where they had originally sent me. But when they transferred me out of there, where they sent me to, they literally cannot send you to, according to their rules and regulations. If you are schizophrenic or delusional, they're not allowed. Multiple occasions when I would write about what those officers were doing that was wrong in that prison, and I would try to turn it in, I would have to turn it into the very predator, and then they would read it and come back to me. But I was told that I had to turn it in when it happened, or that these officers would never do these things. Their very own cameras show it, but you got to call the ombudsman. I had an ombudsman at the beginning. His name was James, and he was going to actually try. So what they did is they gave me a different ombudsman who, well, it was a rubber stamp. So then he's in there for other inmates saying, yeah, dude, it's fucked up, but you can't do anything about it. And I say, well, you need to speak up. Well, I can't. They're right. They can try, but they're not going to be heard. Miranda Nuzzi is going to write the same thing on their paperwork that she wrote down on mine. Inmates are not allowed to turn in reports for other inmates. They wanted to tell me that I needed to get a hold of the Nebraska State Patrol and write them. I was trying, but then the lack of envelopes. There's only a certain amount of envelopes you're allowed to have. It's not enough to take care of your legal obligations. You are allowed access to legal materials. That doesn't mean that they're going to allow you that access or allow you to use them. That doesn't mean that they're going to allow you access to the legal materials that you need. They abused me repeatedly. They went out of their way repeatedly to antagonize the situation and to trigger me intentionally. Just like Dan, all I did was tell him about the situation at Shannon Alvarado's. That's all I did, and he fucking flipped his shit on me. Just like the situation with Diane Boatman, where Dan Fabert flipped his shit on me. Does any of the pretty stuff that Diane Boatman typed help me to turn this in? Does any of that get me an advocate to speak for me? To help me to do these things? No. A bird in the hand is worth two in the bush does not protect me from the officers and medical community doing to me what they did to Elijah McClain. Killing two birds with one stone. Yeah, I get the concept. But conceptually is completely different from effort. If your effort is to tell me a concept, well, that's not an effort. That is not an actual effort to take action. When you choose to do nothing, you have still made a choice. The choice of inaction. Laura Nelson chose to keep her mouth shut and to say nothing because she's selfish. I understand her selfishness. But she just made things a whole lot worse for her son. Because now there's an established reputation from me for autistic people because of what's on the internet, because of things that I was forced to do, because she didn't care about autistic rights. Not even her son's autistic rights. She only cares about her own. I get that she wants to utilize the time that she has with her son to the best of her abilities, but what she's doing is fucking her son over in the long run, because she knows that when she's dead, he's going to go to a facility where they're going to treat him like a retard. Where if one of the facility staff does something to him, he can't even turn it in. And even if he were able to, the staff would just cover for each other's asses because it's just video recording. There's a reason that they only gave me the video recording from the hospital and not the body cameras. Because they knew that if I posted up the video recording from the hospital, that they could still try to partially sell their narrative. Their narrative that I had assaulted those officers. No, they were assaulting me. They put me in extreme pain. Knowingly, willingly, and intentionally, but without the body cameras. When I was yelling that they were hurting me, they get to pretend that I was opening my mouth to bite them. When they told me to roll one way and then roll another and then to stay still, they get to pretend that that was me fighting to get out and to get free. But you can also see that when they tell me to roll one direction, they dig in my pockets. They tell me to roll the other, they dig in my pockets. There's a reason why the audio is the most important in those situations as far as that goes. It's because they can sell whatever narrative they want after they've antagonized the situation by repeatedly lying to you. I was never, to this day, allowed to defend myself against any of the people who still want to claim that I said police kill me the day they came and picked me up. No, I said please. Please. That's because Tim Beeson, another one of my predators, they want to make out to be the good guy. This guy is a rapist. I mean, by Colorado law, he's a rapist. Statutory rape is still rape. By her own admission and his, and also the words of others. Yeah, she was only 14, asshole. 14 years old, and how old were you? People want to pretend that it was inappropriate for me to have a friendship with Natalie Bollinger. That was her that pushed that. When it was over, it should have been over. That should have been the end of it. But because of her drug addiction, because of her embarrassment, she never came forward. She allowed people to harm me repeatedly. And when I came forward with the truth, not only about that situation, but about her family, and I posted up literally her own words, well, then I'm a bad guy, aren't I? When I ask for help, when I follow the procedures that you are told to go to get help, when police officers are telling you that you need to go to this person, they're telling you to leave you alone. Leave them alone. You know, Natalie Bollinger wants to be left alone. Well, so do I. And I'm going to officers. Well, you need to try to get a hold of her and settle it out of court. It gets real messy if you got to go the legal route. You need to try to settle it out of court. You guys need to learn how to deal with this as adults. You're a grown-ass adult, dude. Just talk to her. And it wasn't just cops telling me that. It was a lot of different people. And when I tried to explain the situation, dude, she's telling me not to. What I'm telling you, because at first, it was before she was sending me that shit. At first, it was just a matter of me letting her know what was going on and asking her to put a stop to it. Going to my friends and trying to let them know what's going on. But when people want to, with Natalie Bollinger, blocking me because people are trying to, these very same druggies and predators who have victimized her entire life are telling her, oh, well, he's this kind of guy, or he's that kind of a guy. He must be. Natalie Bollinger knew me in person. These people didn't. They were making assumptions based on my age and based on my looks, not based on my content of character. And many people wrote about my content of character. Many people tried to speak up about my content of character, but that didn't matter. You did not compare that content of character prior to Natalie's death to how I was, prior to the situation in Virginia versus how I was afterwards. You can look at the two and you can see night and day. Yes, I was a completely different person and absolutely 100% for a reason. That was a 100% sign of abuse by the training of these mandated reporters themselves and the training of these officers themselves. These people have this training. They know that when someone has an extreme change in behaviors like that, it is most likely because of abuse. But rather than taking that to heart and taking it seriously, they played on that and abused the shit out of it to pretend like I was a bad person for my trauma response. But then you look at all of the anger and the hatred that was directed at me and how these people didn't try to come forward in court. None of them. Not until Meg Missegatis in January of 2021. When was Natalie Bollinger killed? December 29th of 2017. When did I first start trying to get help stopping this abuse? When I was still in Virginia. The first time I went to the cops about the situation with Natalie Bollinger was when they were driving me from being stuck in the road outside of Natalie Bollinger's house, or Natalie Bollinger's mother's house, on Military Highway in Chesapeake, Virginia, to the hospital in Chesapeake, Virginia. Not the jail, the hospital. I was charged with 0 crimes because I had committed 0 crimes. I was released from the hospital rather than being sent in for a mental health check, rather than being put on a 72-hour suicide hold. I was released from the hospital. They let me go free. They did not feel that I was a risk to Natalie Bollinger or her family, and there were no threats towards Natalie Bollinger or her family, but I don't have access to that, do I? And then you pretend like I'm a liar because I don't have access to recordings that I wasn't able to make. They took away my phone. They were thinking about putting me on suicide watch. I didn't need suicide watch. I needed to be hooked up to an IV, and that's the first thing they did. After I was hooked up to an IV, they really didn't need to do anything else. They didn't need to have a licensed independent mental health care professional come in and sit with me, and, well, they did anyway. And, of course, that person coming in and sitting with me and listening to what I had to say and the things that I had to say, and it not sounding crazy to her, it being entirely plausible and probable in that situation, in that scenario. But you guys don't want to hear that. Meanwhile, I have the hospital paperwork. It shows that they diagnosed me with an anxiety state, marijuana use. I never pretended I didn't use marijuana. I told them I hadn't used marijuana in 5 weeks, which is the truth, and they wrote down marijuana use. It's kind of like when they ask you if you smoke. You know, if I'm coming to you about abuse, and you're going to tell me I was abused because I smoke, well, that's just stupid. If you're going to pretend like it's okay for people to do these things to me because I'm some big druggie because I smoke pot, well, that's a major issue. But you know what else they wrote down in there? That they had me hooked up to a saline solution. They also diagnosed me with diabetes mellitus, which is, well, a wrong diagnosis. Yes, I could sue the shit out of Chesapeake Hospital for diagnosing me with diabetes mellitus based on foot rot. I was wearing the boots and the socks that I was having to trudge through a hurricane in. That water, when I took those 2 soldiers to their place, and we didn't even make it all the way to their place, that water was halfway up my floorboard. I mean, it was pouring into my car. We had one soldier sitting on another soldier's lap in the passenger seat of my vehicle. And we're driving through water that's almost a foot tall, and we're making jokes about how we got the smallest boat in the Navy. Woo-hoo! That was my experience in Virginia. There was a lot of fun people. The people at the Starbucks that Natalie and Alicia, part of the way they were able to convince me to park behind where Alicia Bollinger worked is that there was a Starbucks right there next door, and they already knew somebody there because Alicia Bollinger's boyfriend worked there, and that everything was going to be cool. And guess what? Those people, just like every other Starbucks, everybody was fucking cool. There's only been, with few exceptions, one of those exceptions was Devin Cockerill, and she intended on doing the right thing. She had the right intentions, and there's situations with that to this day, I got to admit that that's not entirely her fault. I mean, she had given me her contact information so that I could call her and talk to her, and I forgot that she gave it to me because by the time that she actually invited me to her house. See, you're going to see how with all these people, them not understanding because they've never lived through it, that's the whole point of all of this. They're not going to fight for my black rights because they're not black, so to speak. Just like everyone else, they're subject to those same bias. And the people, the professionals that we go to, they know that the system is so completely fucked and doesn't work. Everybody tells me to play the system. Cody, he's one of the security guards, spoke to me the other night at the hospital. And him and one of the nurses, a male nurse, by the way. You guys want to have a stereotype that all nurses are skinny and pretty and slutty. And maybe there's a few nurses out there that try to play up to that stereotype, but not as many as the jocks in in Chapel, Nebraska. You say these stereotypes are wrong, but that doesn't mean that there aren't people that try to live up to the stereotypes. When we're going to judge somebody, we do need to judge them individually on that situation, not on the merits of others. I mean, to use the term mentally ill to insinuate that someone who has PTSD is a liar about the abuse that gave them PTSD to begin with. To pretend like because they have PTSD that they're schizophrenic, and use the fact that you're pretending they're schizophrenic as an excuse not to look at any evidence. It's pretty fucked up. Dan Faber wanted to claim he's finally speaking up and saying what he thinks. No, he's been going through and making excuses for everybody since day one. I'm glad he admitted that he bought those phones for me, because I had said that he did. And that verifies that that's just one more thing that proves that I'm not schizophrenic. Something that if he'd have come forward to the police about, they wouldn't have been able to write down on a piece of paper that nobody was willing to help me. No, they absolutely were willing to help me all sorts of ways except turning it in. And of course, they all knew that I was trying to jump through all of those hoops to get it turned in. But because they were able to deny me access, and because the public helped them, and Facebook's algorithms helped them, and because my friends wanted to make assumptions after the fact, make assumptions because I wasn't able to get into contact with them. A lot of people ditched me because they were sending me messages and thought that I was ignoring them. No, I was on a Facebook ban, and Facebook doesn't tell them that you're Facebook banned. At that point in time, when you were Facebook banned, you couldn't even use Messenger. Now, if you're on a Facebook ban, you can still message people. And I can prove to you that those algorithms are like that then and that they're like that now. That the changes that were made were actually made. That the roadblocks that I faced, I actually faced. But my BLM doesn't care. My BLM, well, with the leadership of actual BLM, they know that if they don't fight this fight, that it could harm them. These officers, if these black leadership become homeless black people, they absolutely will. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. They absolutely will be victimized. Will. If they don't fight this fight now and get their rights before they're forced into homelessness. Because that could happen at any point in time. Most of you are 8 paychecks ago would have been homeless if it wasn't for your overextended credit cards. and loans from the bank that you obviously are trying to pay back with overextended credit cards, and now you are trying to get more credit cards, and as long as you can keep up with the payment on the other credit cards, the minimum payments on those other credit cards, you've got excellent credit now, so you can still get another credit card to utilize to try to pay those off, and eventually that's all going to catch up to you. By that point, you're dead, and the rest of us have to pick up that debt. They increase everything in cost, but they don't increase the coverage, right? When somebody is called mentally ill and they can use that to discredit them, but they didn't do that to Natalie Bollinger, did they? Natalie Bollinger was quote-unquote mentally ill, but magically everything that she says must be ordained by God as the truth, right? Because she typed it, regardless of what the evidence shows, because she typed it, it must be true. Regardless of what the evidence shows as far as what Natalie Bollinger said about us dating, the fact that Kara Johnson Miles wrote down lies and claimed that we were, in my court paperwork, all the way from Texas. Shannon Alvarado claimed she couldn't write a police report from California and wouldn't even make the effort. We argued about that for hours. Kara Johnson Miles, within minutes, I am certain, of me literally having to threaten people on the internet, make sure that it is public, and literally typed out that I was doing this so that my predators would turn it in because nobody was listening to me. And then I made those things private. I didn't destroy them. I made them private so that people couldn't destroy it, so that that evidence would be there to show. My intent every step of the way was doing the right thing. But by Dan Fabert's own admission, he wasn't even willing to try to turn it into the cops. Now, these people who claimed that they would try to help me turn it into the cops, and every fucking time that it was time for them to keep their word, there was always some excuse, some last-minute excuse. And I say excuse because they are excuses. If they weren't excuses, you would have spoken up in court. You got to hear Tony DeStassi in our conversation. He thought that I called him for advice. No, I called him to verify shit that he verified. He wanted to be pissed off that I recorded him and put him on the internet, but he should have come forward. He should have come forward about that situation when it happened, instead of Officer Gerhardt getting to investigate his buddies and clear them of wrongdoing. Just like he did when I had to call him from Cheyenne, Wyoming. You have any idea how difficult it was to even find out who I'm supposed to contact? Meanwhile, if you have to take it to their own department, they're going to cover their own ass. That's why mandated reporter training is so important. They explain in that mandated reporter training, especially with at-risk and disabled adults, that a lot of these people working together, they want to give their buddies, their coworkers, the benefit of the doubt. In many cases, they're afraid of losing their jobs if they try to turn in a coworker or having the claim that they have a vendetta against their coworker. In many cases, it's because they've seen that it doesn't actually work. One of the reasons that it doesn't actually work, and that people do lose their jobs over that, even though by law they're not supposed to. People don't have, if you're a nurse at one of those facilities, you don't have the money for a lawyer. When you lose your job, you don't have the money for a civil lawyer who's going to help you with that. It's not like you have access to the police officers unit and their army of lawyers. At the very beginning, that's when money was the most important, especially with officers like Waylon Lolatai assaulting me, refusing me to give me his name. Them going out of their way to be as cruel as they could, but I didn't have anyone there in my corner, just like Elijah McClain. Why was Elijah McClain victimized? There was no one there in his corner. And the rules in those facilities allow the predators to get away with it. And that's the privacy laws. Oh, they might hear your social security number. Well, they can see it on the fucking camera when I write it down, can't they? Those very same people who have access to those cameras also have access to that fucking paperwork, don't they? These laws were not written with common sense in mind. No, they absolutely were. These laws were written with the common sense of lobbyists for these facilities, for these rich people whose money is invested in these facilities. Common sense dictates that if there is proof of wrongdoing at that facility is responsible for it, not just that employee. Those investors could lose a lot of money if employees are antagonistic and do wrong shit. So they increase the chances of those employees being antagonistic and breaking the law and utilizing that position of power to victimize the most at-risk people in the country. That makes it so that the police can take one of their victims who's trying to turn them in to a mental hospital. They can lie to the mental hospital. The police know that, especially in places where now they have to have their body cameras on, aren't allowed to turn them off. They're not allowed in the state of Colorado to do any of the dirty tricks with body cameras that they had done to me previously. It's also illegal at that point in time for them to do them, but now it is mandated by law that they have to wear them in those situations and have them on for every bit of it. So those nurses may be mandated reporters, but just like Marcia Estrada, just like Megan Mistigatis, either A, they don't have that training, so they don't realize how much trouble they could seriously fucking get into. Or B, they have that training. They know that training doesn't work. They know that what you're told to do doesn't work. Especially when you're called mentally ill. These mental health professionals verified the things that I said. Their own training verifies the dynamics and demographics that I'm dealing with. The news itself verifies what I said about these predators. Verifies the people that I tried to turn in, like Michelle Decini, were criminals. Were committing criminal acts. And Sarah Nelson, also committing criminal acts. Not only for her own benefit sexually, but also to protect her coworkers, as is explained in the mandated reporter training videos. Now, when I took the abuse in those situations to all of those people, as a developmentally disabled adult, Sarah Nelson was legally obligated to assist me in turning it in. These quote-unquote superior officers, as my caregivers, as well as, well, people like Ted Hill and Dr. Sears, who, according to the law, are mandated reporters. According to the law. How many of them tried to turn it in? When I was in the prison, I did get to see people from the Department of Health and Human Services. They claimed that their job was only to help me to get things established when I was released from prison, but as a county safekeep, they weren't going to do that job. It's not that I didn't try to turn in the abuse everywhere that I went. I mean, those people are at that facility, but those Department of Health and Human Services workers are going to believe the guards over you 100% of the time. They're not going to give a shit. They're not even going to try. They're going to blow you off and make every excuse. And of course, in my evidence back there, the evidence that they went out of their way to lie and steal and manipulate and do everything they could to prevent evidence of their own wrongdoing being shown in court, up to and including manipulating hospital staff, manipulating police officers. You get to see the sympathy plea. You get to hear how Leslie Snell got away with what she did by throwing on the fucking Tear Works. That's right. Pretty white girl, blonde-haired, blue-eyed white girl can pass any fucking lie by throwing on the fucking waterworks. Now there's the part where she says things that are actually true but are not against the law. The things that I said were not malicious against her. Absolutely not. And when she wants to pretend like I would harm her children, literally, she is projecting onto me. I am being punished at this point over her paranoid delusions, but they're not paranoid delusions, are they? No, this is a ploy to try to make me seem crazy and to prevent any of the crimes that she committed from being shown in court, up to and including the safety issues that Joan Hanson and that judge, even with irrefutable evidence that I had tried repeatedly to turn in Scott DaCosta, that it is against the law at that point for them to force me to go to Scott DaCosta, that Scott DaCosta was never investigated, not from 2018 forward. And when the Nebraska State Patrol wanted to pretend after the fact that they were going to do something, the demeanor of those officers and the fact that the things that they said did not line up with what their coworkers had said, set off many red flags that people like Megan Missigate, she doesn't care. She's frustrated. She doesn't care at that point. She is frustrated. She has tried stuff that didn't work, and instead of speaking out about the fact that the things that law enforcement wanted to pretend through this entire thing that I was not trying, that I was making zero effort to do these things. Literally, there is irrefutable evidence that I told the truth, that I did try these things. There's irrefutable evidence on paper of these interactions and these places that I was sent. All of these places having a vested interest in their own, and no vested interest in my safety or the truth. And after their wrongdoings, their vested interest was only in protecting themselves from legal repercussions. That includes Laura Nelson. Yes, I will absolutely speak about the things that they did. The wonderful things that they did to try to help. To this day, I still speak about because they did happen. When these people want to be angry at me for saying that they made no effort. Well, that's what the cops said. And they prevented you from being at that court date, prevented me from being in contact with you to let you know what was going on. And they were right that you made no effort. You made every effort except for the most important. You never came forward to the police. You never came forward to the courts. You never came forward to the media, and you never tried. You told me these things. The efforts that you made, you know what? I had to twist your fucking arm to get you to do those things, to get you to come forward and tell the truth. I had to record you months and months after the fact. I had been kind to you so much. I had given up every part of my life for you. I had stuck up for you when nobody else would. And when I just needed you to tell the truth, you made every excuse not to. Or you promised that you were going to and led me on until the statute of limitations was over. You allowed these predators to continue to harm me over a narrative you knew to be false. When I spoke up and said your involvement and all of the wonderful things that you didn't come forward. You let them continue to do those things. You allowed them to continue to do those things. You told me that you feared for your families. You told me people were threatening your lives, and I spoke up about it. And yet still you didn't come forward. And I had to record you and put you on YouTube. You didn't like that, did you? You shouldn't have done wrong shit. And then after the fact, you wanna do something real stupid, don't you? You wanna claim you never said things that you said. And then when I posted up, after you have called me a liar and accused me of slandering your name, and then I posted up on the internet for the world to hear it, and then what happens? Now you're my biggest opponent, aren't you? Now you've become somebody who's actually going to look through that stuff, and now you're going to cherry pick. You're going to project it that it's everyone else's fault but yours. Aren't you? It's my fault, or it's your autistic daughter's fault, or it's the police's fault that you didn't come forward. With Kayla, aka Peaches, Kayla Trujillo. Now, of course, my public pretender claimed that she called Kayla Trujillo, and Kayla Trujillo verified it. She said that the reason that she didn't call back is because, well, my public pretender in Arapahoe County didn't give a callback number. Then there's the letter that I sent her while I was incarcerated. And Miss Peaches claimed, even though there was important stuff in there about what was going on, so that she could actually help me. She claimed that she put it in her backpack and that her backpack got rained on, so she couldn't read it. When I spoke up about these things that prevented me from being in contact, the fact that Mandy Hughes had sent me money for the phone so that I could make these phone calls, that it literally never arrived. She said that they did take it off of her credit card. I told her that she needed to cancel it and she needed to get her money back because they weren't giving it to me. They kept on claiming it wasn't there, and as a result, I was prevented from access to the telephones, from access to call the people I needed to call and let them know what was going on. I was prevented from legal access. When I would write about how those guards were treating me, they got to play on the mentally ill tag. In the prisons, on the mental health ward, let's go with Lincoln Correctional Center. That's C2 is the mental health ward. If you're schizophrenic or delusional, or if an officer claims that you're schizophrenic or delusional, that's where they put you. Well, with the doctors obviously not believing that I was schizophrenic or delusional, they sent me to a different one. And when I talked to Dr. Sears, because he was in charge of the next one, I said, "Hey, Dr. Sears, I don't belong here. You know, I'm sick and tired of them pretending like I'm schizophrenic or delusional, and they're pretending this. My predators are pretending this in court, that I'm schizophrenic and delusional." And he said, "Well, you don't need to worry about that. If you were schizophrenic or delusional, or any of those doctors thought that you were schizophrenic or delusional, you wouldn't be in this section. You wouldn't be here. You'd be on C2 still. The reason that you're here is because the doctors who have already assessed you have already said that you're not delusional and you're not schizophrenic. That's the reason that you're over here." But did my public pretender make any efforts to defend me whatsoever? No, he made absolutely none. He wanted to push Meg Missigatis out of the scenario, just like those judges Refuse to allow her to speak. Refuse to allow her to actually advocate for me when she finally did actually try. Now, there's a lot of stuff where, of course, she wants to throw it in my face that she can't do those things because she's in Lincoln. I spoke up about the fact that you can't do those things from Lincoln. Don't throw it in my face as if I never acknowledged that. And that's the problem with people who don't have a vested interest. Like if you've got a lot of white people in charge of BLM, and when black people come to them and say, hey, there's an issue, these white people go, oh no, that's not how it really is. Oh no, you guys are full of it. Oh no, you see that's not how it really is. Are you sure about that? Or they make every excuse not to speak out. These are supposed to be the people that we go to speak out. Our quote-unquote leadership, which comes in many forms. The leadership of BLM, when other black people come to them and tell them about their experiences, they do speak up about those, at least for the ones in houses, because the black community, just like every other community in America, knows that the homeless don't matter. The homeless don't matter to the American public. And many of those black people have a vested interest because when they are victimized by the police and they don't have any recourse, kind of like that girl who is raped by her dad and she doesn't have any recourse. She's already tried telling people. She's tried telling her mom. She was blown off, called mentally ill, till she cut herself. Then they sent her to a mental hospital where they refused to listen to her and diagnosed her with suicidal ideations, and then she'll never be heard again. She's mentally ill. Daddy can rape her whenever she wants. She's in a facility where she's not a human being, and she can't see any of her loved ones. You know, some of those girls went back to getting fucked by their own dads just because they wanted to see their loved ones. When your abuser abuses you, there's something called the honeymoon period. This is where afterwards they're all apologetic and everything is smooth sailing and they're gonna change. I changed. I was the good guy. I changed. I started doing the things that the predators that you listen to do. Name calling you and berating you. But I didn't slander your name. I showed the truth. Well, James Payton, I gotta give him the benefit of the doubt. I'm not his doctor. I know what type of medications he takes. I can't verify that the steroids he takes are legal or illegal. I can verify that I did. Am I incorrect? Now, I may not agree with him on that situation, but he's going to be my guardian now. He's not going to help me fight this stuff. He's going to help me get put in a home. See, this is the options we have. When I said that people were threatening to kill my friends and family, and I showed evidence that my friends and family victimized me for that. When I showed evidence that none of these people tried to make a police report, and after the fact they wanted to backtrack and pretend I was never trying that. But you go back through and you look through all of our messages, you can tell plainly and clearly and simply that that's exactly my intent. I didn't hint at it. My motivation and my power forward has 100% through all of this been the protection and preservation of human lives. That includes when I literally threatened to kill people back because I was being told that it didn't matter. It didn't matter that these people were threatening me. These people in the Natalie Bollinger case, the Bollingers themselves and their friends are threatening and harassing, not just over the internet, but yes, on the internet too. Evidence of their threats and harassment from them and their buddies and the people they were working with. And I was asking people not to do that. I was telling people, don't do that, that doesn't help. But you get to hear the conversation between Cara Rogers, aka Cara Mia, and myself on my YouTube channel. You get to hear the conversation between myself and Aaron Cockerham, who is also friends with Dan Faber and angry at me for posting that video. It shows I told the truth. It shows that I told the truth about those people, even though they never came forward in court, and they never came forward to the police about it. Ever. These people who claimed that they were going to help me. I am an at-risk adult who is in a desperate situation. Whether I believe you or not, I need the help. And I have a lack of options. When you want to blame me for the things that I endured, for having to trust people that I knew to be untrustworthy, and just have the hope that they might, and you guys want to treat me like I was paranoid and didn't want the help. No, absolutely not. I wasn't just paranoid. I had experience. Dan Faber, while verifying the things that I said were true about him and the police, about him and Layla Johnson, about him and the situation with Shannon Alvarado and the manning up, he still wants to accuse me of being a liar and use situations that, well, he was not there for. That's right. They verify the evidence that I said that they should have verified to begin with. They have verified it. But they're pissed off that I posted up the truth about their inaction. About how these BLM leadership are not actually caring about the black folks. Because they're not black. They're not autistic. They're not disabled. They're not on the streets. Some of them have disabilities, but they're in houses. They have families that help them. At-risk adults, there's a reason we're at risk. We're at risk even with our parents' help. We're at risk even with that assistance. Look at Elijah McClain. Loving family. But because they allowed him to go to the grocery store by himself, he was murdered by the police and medical staff in the state of Colorado. Because he was autistic.